Johnny Carson hosted The Tonight Show for 3 decades, welcoming America's biggest celebrities into millions of homes every night. With his friendly demeanor and infectious laugh, he made viewers feel like they were watching friends chat over drinks. But when the studio lights dimmed and the audience left, Carson's famous smile would often vanish. People who worked closely with him say that America's beloved late-night host kept a mental list of guests he believed were genuinely terrible people beneath their public personas. Those who worked on The Tonight Show remember Carson as the consummate professional when cameras were rolling. But the moment they cut to commercial, he would sometimes lean toward his sidekick, Ed McMahon, and quietly say that certain guests should never be allowed near cameras or children. As Carson grew older and eventually retired, he became more willing to share his real feelings about the celebrities he had secretly disliked throughout his career. The stories he told paint a troubling picture of beloved stars who were completely different people when the public wasn't watching. Some of Carson's most shocking revelations involved a famous actress who seemed sweet and fragile on his show, but had verbally attacked a young production assistant so viciously backstage that security guards had to step in. There was also a popular male celebrity who Carson caught doing something so disturbing in his dressing room that the host nearly contacted the police. These weren't just temperamental artists or demanding performers. According to Carson, these were genuinely dark individuals hiding behind their fame and talent. They were predators, abusers, and manipulators that the entertainment industry protected for decades. If you're fascinated by these glimpses behind Hollywood's glamorous curtain and want to learn more shocking truths about entertainment's golden age, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We regularly dive deep into the untold stories that reveal what really happened when the cameras stopped rolling. Your support helps us bring these important stories to light. Joan Crawford appeared on The Tonight Show in 1970. And television audiences saw the gracious Hollywood legend they had admired for years. With her perfect posture, flawless appearance, and practiced charm, Crawford represented everything glamorous about old Hollywood. But according to multiple people who worked on the show, Crawford's behavior when cameras weren't rolling revealed someone completely different. Carson later told his biographer that she was one of the coldest people he ever interviewed, like talking to a beautiful statue with nothing inside. Problems began before Crawford even arrived at the studio. Her list of demands included lighting requirements so detailed that the show's technical director still had the 4-page document in his files decades later. Everything needed to be exact, remembered one producer. The angle of her chair, the height of Carson's desk, even the studio temperature had to be precisely 67 degrees, not 66 or 68. Crawford arrived 3 hours before taping with her own makeup team, despite the show having award-winning makeup artists on staff. What truly revealed Crawford's character was how differently she treated people based on their importance. She practically bowed to Carson, said a stagehand who was there that day, but when a young production assistant accidentally entered her dressing room with the water Crawford had requested, the actress exploded. Multiple witnesses say Crawford launched into such a vicious tirade that staff members in the hallway froze in shock. She allegedly called the assistant, a 20-year-old woman just starting in the industry, terrible names, and suggested she find work elsewhere where incompetence might be valued. The young woman ran away in tears, and Crawford demanded she be fired. Carson's producer refused, creating tension that lasted throughout the taping. The most disturbing aspect wasn't just how Crawford treated staff members. It was the calculating way she transformed the instant cameras turned on. She was like a machine pretending to be human, one producer recalled. She had rehearsed every answer, every laugh, every supposedly spontaneous moment. Nothing was genuine. During commercial breaks, Crawford would immediately drop her smile and sit in stone-faced silence without speaking to anyone, then instantly come back to life when the red light returned. Carson, known for his ability to make guests comfortable, struggled to find any real connection with Crawford.
After the show, he reportedly told Ed McMahon that he had interviewed corpses with more personality. Years later, when Christina Crawford's book revealed Joan's alleged abuse of her adopted children, Carson wasn't surprised. According to close friends, he simply nodded and said he had seen who she really was during those few hours, and he believed every word of the memoir. Frank Sinatra and Johnny Carson appeared to have a cordial, even friendly relationship on screen. The legendary singer would joke, tell stories, and occasionally perform, while Carson played the respectful host. Behind the scenes, however, Carson reportedly harbored a deep dislike for Sinatra, not because of his talent, which Carson respected, but because of how the singer treated people when he thought no one important was watching. If he didn't sing, he'd be working for organized crime, Carson once told a friend, according to multiple biographies, and sometimes it seemed like he was both. Sinatra's appearances on The Tonight Show were notorious among crew members for the tension they created. According to longtime staff, Sinatra would arrive with up to 8 men who were described as not show business types, more like guys you wouldn't want to meet in a dark alley. These men would spread throughout the studio, watching staff, and creating an atmosphere one cameraman described as feeling like being under surveillance. What truly disturbed Carson was witnessing how Sinatra treated people he considered beneath him. During one appearance in the early 70s, a floor manager made the mistake of giving Sinatra the standard 3-minute warning for his segment. According to several witnesses, Sinatra grabbed the man by his tie and pulled him close, saying, "Nobody tells him when he has 3 minutes, and he'll go on when he's ready." The floor manager, a Korean War veteran in his 50s, was visibly shaken afterward. When Carson saw this interaction on his office monitor, he nearly canceled the segment. Only his producer's reminder about the ratings Sinatra would bring convinced him to continue. Another source of tension was Sinatra's unreliability. He allegedly canceled appearances at the last minute multiple times, including once just 2 hours before taping when he was already in the building but decided he wasn't in the mood. The most revealing moment came during a commercial break when Sinatra made a disparaging comment on a female staff member's appearance loud enough for those nearby to hear. Carson, breaking his usual professional detachment, coldly responded that they don't talk about his staff that way. The tension was obvious, with Sinatra visibly surprised that anyone, even Johnny Carson, would challenge him.
When cameras returned, both men maintained their professional facades, but crew members noticed Carson's questions became noticeably shorter and less engaged. After that appearance, Carson reportedly told his producer he didn't care about ratings and to limit Sinatra to once a year maximum. This was significant because Carson rarely involved himself in booking decisions and almost never banned guests outright. For him to restrict Sinatra's appearances spoke volumes about his personal distaste for the singer's behavior. Orson Welles appeared on The Tonight Show multiple times during Carson's era, always generating memorable television with his booming voice, larger-than-life presence, and remarkable stories from his storied career. Viewers at home saw a charming, brilliant storyteller. Carson and his staff saw something else, a man whose ego had grown so enormous that he believed normal rules of television simply didn't apply to him. "Never again," Carson reportedly said after one particularly difficult Welles appearance. "That guy thinks he's still running an empire." Problems typically began before Welles even arrived at the studio. According to Tonight Show writers, Welles routinely dismissed any prepared questions or topics Carson's team had developed. He told them their questions were ordinary and obvious, one former writer recalled. He literally crossed them all out and handed back an empty page. This put Carson in the uncomfortable position of having to interview one of cinema's most significant figures with no preparation or framework, particularly challenging given Welles' tendency to launch into lengthy, meandering stories that were difficult to edit for time. During one appearance in the mid-70s, Welles was scheduled for a 7-minute segment. He stayed on the couch for nearly 25 minutes, ignoring multiple subtle signals from Carson that it was time to wrap up. Carson had a series of signals he would give guests when time was running short, a director explained, but Welles saw them all and just kept talking. They had to bump 2 other guests entirely. Wells's behavior toward staff was equally dismissive. He reportedly refused to speak directly to production assistants, instead addressing them in the third person, even when they were standing right beside him, saying things like, "Tell the girl I need more water," or "Ask the boy to adjust the light." What particularly irritated Carson was Wells's habit of treating The Tonight Show as if it were his own personal platform, rather than Carson's program. Wells would bring props, change topics without warning, and even attempt to direct camera shots from his seat. He once actually stood up and tried to tell camera operators which angles to use, a former producer explained, and Carson was furious. After one particularly challenging appearance, Carson reportedly told Ed McMahon that genius doesn't excuse everything, and being brilliant doesn't give you the right to take over someone else's show. Carson, himself a perfectionist about television production, found Wells's disregard for the medium's constraints especially irritating. Though he maintained public respect for Wells's immense contributions to film, privately he began to view him as a cautionary tale of what happens when talent is eclipsed by ego. When Bette Davis appeared on The Tonight Show, audiences saw the legendary actress at her most engaging, telling witty stories in her distinctive voice, elegant even in her later years, and filled with fascinating Hollywood history. What they didn't see were the moments before and after the camera started rolling, when Davis reportedly revealed a personality so abrasive that even the unflappable Carson was taken aback. "She doesn't need a stage, she needs a courtroom," Carson allegedly told Ed McMahon after one particularly difficult appearance. No one should have to be cross-examined by Bette Davis without a lawyer present. Davis's first offense, according to multiple Tonight Show staff accounts, was her treatment of other guests. When booked on episodes with multiple celebrities, Davis would often interrupt or talk over them, especially if they were younger performers or women. She would physically turn her back on other guests on the couch, a former talent coordinator recalled. If someone else was telling a story that got laughs, you could see her fuming, planning how to regain control. Behind the scenes, Davis's behavior was even more problematic. She reportedly demanded whiskey in her dressing room before appearances, not unusual for guests of her era, but her alcohol consumption sometimes led to inappropriate comments and behavior. According to female staff members who worked on the show in the 70s, Davis regularly used offensive language that shocked even by the standards of that time. One makeup artist recalled Davis refusing her services and making cruel comments about her appearance. Carson, who generally avoided confrontation, made an exception for Davis when she began verbally attacking a cue card holder for being too slow during rehearsal. Carson actually stepped in, remembered a production assistant who witnessed the incident. He very quietly told her that on his show they speak to everyone with respect, or they speak at all. She was stunned, probably not used to being challenged, but she backed down. What made Davis particularly difficult for Carson was the contrast between her undeniable talent and her treatment of others. Unlike some difficult guests who could be dismissed as lacking talent, Davis was a genuine legend whose work Carson admired. After her final appearance on the show in the early 80s, Carson reportedly told his producer, "That was the last. Life's too short to spend it being verbally attacked by Bette Davis, no matter how many Oscars she has." Mickey Rooney was Hollywood royalty, the #1 box office star from 1939 to 1941, and a living connection to the industry's golden age. His appearances on The Tonight Show should have been nostalgic celebrations of an illustrious career. Instead, according to multiple staff accounts, Rooney's visits became notorious for his inappropriate behavior, chaotic energy, and occasional intoxication. He thinks being short gives him license to be a pervert, Carson reportedly told his producer after one particularly problematic appearance in the mid-70s.
Rooney, then in his mid-50s, developed a reputation among female staff members for unwanted touching, suggestive comments, and ignoring professional boundaries. According to multiple accounts, young production assistants would ask to be reassigned when they learned Rooney was booked. He would grab your hand when you brought him water, try to pull you closer, ask if you were married, recalled a former assistant who worked on the show in the late 70s. If you tried to leave, he'd hold on to your wrist just a little too long. Even more concerning was Rooney's apparent inability to recognize when he'd had too much to drink.
According to Tonight Show employees, he appeared visibly intoxicated during at least 3 separate appearances, slurring words and losing his train of thought mid-sentence. During one infamous segment in 1977, Rooney began telling an anecdote that quickly became inappropriate, forcing Carson to cut him off and change the subject. During the commercial break, Carson reportedly asked his producer whether Rooney was drunk or if this was just who he was now. What made Rooney particularly difficult for Carson was the generational gap in understanding what constituted appropriate behavior. Born in 1920, Rooney came from an era of Hollywood where certain conduct toward women was commonplace, if not condoned. Carson was no prude, but he had clear lines about professional conduct, explained a director who worked on the show for many years. Rooney seemed genuinely confused when called out on his behavior, like he didn't understand why it was a problem. After one appearance where Rooney made repeated comments about a young actress also appearing that night, Carson took the unusual step of apologizing to her personally after the taping. The director recalled that he had never seen Carson so embarrassed by a guest's behavior. He told her, "That's not how professionals act on his show, and it won't happen again." True to his word, Rooney's appearances became less frequent in the late 70s and early 80s, with Carson reportedly insisting on daytime pre-recordings rather than live evening broadcasts when Rooney was booked. With her glamorous appearance, distinctive accent, and flirtatious personality, Zsa Zsa Gabor was a Tonight Show favorite who appeared dozens of times during Carson's tenure. Viewers saw a charming, over-the-top personality who played up her Hungarian background and many marriages for laughs. Behind the scenes, according to numerous staff accounts, Gabor was one of the most demanding, difficult guests in the show's history. "I'd rather interview a cat," Carson reportedly quipped after a particularly exhausting Gabor appearance. At least the cat wouldn't need 3 assistants and special lighting. Gabor's demands began long before she arrived at the studio. According to former Tonight Show employees, her standard requirements included a specific temperature in her dressing room of exactly 74 degrees, fresh orchids only with no carnations, a bottle of specific water with exactly 3 ice cubes, her own lighting technician flown in at the show's expense, and no female guests younger than 40 booked on the same episode. Her list read like a parody of celebrity demands, recalled a former talent coordinator. They thought it was a joke the first time they received it. When these requirements weren't met exactly, Gabor reportedly would refuse to leave her dressing room until the situation was fixed, often delaying taping and throwing off the entire show's schedule. One of the most infamous incidents occurred when Gabor arrived for a taping and discovered the makeup department didn't have her preferred brand of foundation. According to multiple witnesses, she got into a shouting match with the head makeup artist, demanding someone be sent to Beverly Hills immediately to purchase the correct product. Carson actually had to intervene, a former producer remembered. He called her directly and said something like, "Honey, you look beautiful already, and we have a show to do. Let's save the cosmetics emergency for another day." What particularly annoyed Carson about Gabor's behavior was how it affected overall production. Other guests would be kept waiting, crew members would have to work overtime, and the show's carefully planned schedule would be thrown into chaos. After one appearance where Gabor arrived 40 minutes late and then complained about her introduction, Carson reportedly told his executive producer that next time she wants to be on, tell her they've renamed the show after her and he'll be happy to be her sidekick. Despite these frustrations, Gabor continued to appear on the show throughout Carson's tenure, a testament to her undeniable entertainment value when cameras were actually rolling. Shelley Winters was a 2-time Oscar winner with a career spanning decades, from glamorous roles in her youth to character parts in her later years. On paper, she should have been an ideal Tonight Show guest, experienced, accomplished, and full of Hollywood stories. In reality, according to those who worked on the show, Winters was one of Carson's most unpredictable and volatile guests. "She doesn't talk, she detonates," Carson reportedly said after one particularly explosive appearance. Winters became infamous among the show's staff for her inability or unwillingness to adapt to the light, entertainment-focused format of late-night television. Rather than sharing amusing anecdotes or promoting current projects, she would often launch into intense political speeches or deeply personal revelations that left Carson visibly uncomfortable. During one appearance in the mid-70s, what began as a simple question about a recent film quickly evolved into Winters delivering a 5-minute uninterrupted monologue about government corruption, leaving Carson struggling to find a way to transition to commercial.
Carson was a master of controlling conversations, but with Winters it was like trying to steer a tornado, recalled a former director. Once she got going, all he could do was wait for her to run out of steam. Winters' unpredictability wasn't limited to her conversational topics. She became known for physical outbursts as well. Her reputation for volatility made Tonight Show staff nervous whenever she was booked. They would actually remove certain items from the set when they knew she was coming, admitted a former stage manager. Anything that could be thrown or knocked over would mysteriously disappear before her segments. Despite these challenges, what distinguished Winters from some of Carson's other difficult guests was that her behavior seemed to stem from genuine passion rather than malice or ego. She cared deeply about political and social issues and saw every public appearance as an opportunity to address them, regardless of whether the venue was appropriate. Carson, while visibly uncomfortable during her more intense moments, maintained a certain respect for Winters' authenticity. After one particularly fiery appearance where she criticized war, Carson reportedly told his producer he may not want a vacation with her, but at least she means every word she says. Nevertheless, Winters' appearances became less frequent in the later years of Carson's tenure, with the host preferring guests whose conversational style complemented rather than challenged the show's format. Jane Russell was one of Hollywood's most iconic figures of the 40s and 50s, known for films that made her a major star. With her striking beauty and significant place in film history, she seemed like a natural recurring guest for The Tonight Show. Yet after a few appearances in the early 70s, Russell rarely returned to Carson's couch, a decision that, according to show insiders, stemmed from Carson's discomfort with her increasingly extreme political views and reported treatment of staff members. Carson, while personally holding moderate political views for much of his life, maintained a strict policy of keeping The Tonight Show relatively neutral on divisive political issues. Russell, however, reportedly used backstage interactions to express hard-line views that Carson found troubling. Carson could handle guests having different political opinions, explained a former producer. What bothered him was when those opinions turned into personal attacks on staff members or other guests. According to several accounts, Russell became notorious for making disparaging comments about certain staff members working on the show. During one appearance in the early 70s, she allegedly refused to allow a specific makeup artist to work with her, demanding a replacement. Even more concerning to Carson was a reported incident involving another major star. According to a talent coordinator who worked on the show, Russell refused to be booked on the same episode as this actor, making derogatory comments about personal matters that, though not publicly acknowledged at the time, were known within Hollywood circles. Carson had many friends in various communities, including several staff members, the talent coordinator recalled. He was ahead of his time in not tolerating that kind of discrimination on his show. Carson's final breaking point with Russell allegedly came during a 1973 appearance when she made dismissive comments about civil rights legislation during a commercial break. Though not picked up on broadcast microphones, her remarks were overheard by several crew members and reportedly reached Carson's ears. After that appearance, Russell was noticeably absent from The Tonight Show's guest roster for the remainder of Carson's tenure, one of the few clear cases where Carson appears to have personally prevented future bookings. What made this situation particularly notable was Carson's general reluctance to ban guests outright, especially those with Russell's level of star power and historical significance to Hollywood.
For him to take such a definitive stance spoke volumes about how strongly he objected to her behavior. Jerry Lewis was one of America's most successful entertainers, a groundbreaking comedian, actor, director, and humanitarian known for his annual charity work. His manic energy and physical comedy had made him a global star. Behind the scenes, according to numerous Tonight Show staff accounts, Lewis was also one of the most difficult, demeaning celebrities in Hollywood, a reputation that earned him a special place on Carson's personal blacklist. "He's what happens when ego outgrows talent," Carson reportedly told a colleague after a particularly troublesome Lewis appearance in the mid-70s. Unlike some difficult guests who saved their worst behavior for underlings, Lewis reportedly made no secret of his disdain for Carson himself. During one infamous appearance, Lewis repeatedly talked over Carson, hijacked questions intended for other guests, and at one point actually reached over and adjusted Carson's tie without permission, a move that visibly annoyed the normally unflappable host. Carson hated people touching him without permission, a former producer explained. It was a well-known rule: you don't touch Carson unless he initiates it. Lewis knew this and did it anyway as a power move. Lewis's treatment of crew members was allegedly even worse. According to several accounts, he would refuse to learn staff members' names, referring to them by their function regardless of their experience or seniority. One particularly disturbing incident occurred when a camera operator reportedly coughed quietly during Lewis's rehearsal. According to multiple witnesses, Lewis stopped everything and launched into a tirade, screaming and demanding the cameraman be removed from the studio. Lewis screamed at a camera operator for breathing loudly, confirmed a floor manager who was present. Not talking, breathing. The poor guy had allergies. What Carson found most objectionable about Lewis was the contrast between his public persona as a tireless champion for children and his private behavior toward people who couldn't benefit his career. The two-faced routine made Carson's skin crawl, recalled a producer who worked closely with Carson. He'd watch Lewis cry on his charity program about loving children, then come to our show and treat people like they were subhuman. After Lewis's final appearance on The Tonight Show in the early 80s, Carson reportedly told his executive producer simply, "Never again." Though Carson rarely banned guests outright, Lewis joined the small group of celebrities who were effectively prohibited from the show during its final decade. Years later, when asked about Lewis at a private dinner, Carson reportedly said something that shocked those present with its uncharacteristic harshness. "In a town full of phonies, he stands out as truly hateful, and that takes some doing." Johnny Carson's private feelings about these 9 difficult guests offer a rare, unfiltered glimpse into Hollywood's reality behind the carefully maintained facade of glamour and charm. "Carson saw everything," explained a longtime Tonight Show producer. "For 30 years, every major star had to go through him to reach the American public. He knew who was genuine and who was faking it." What makes Carson's assessments particularly valuable is that he had no reason to exaggerate or invent negative stories. Unlike tabloid journalists or disgruntled employees with access to grind, Carson was at the absolute pinnacle of the entertainment industry. He had nothing to gain by criticizing these celebrities and everything to lose if his honesty damaged relationships with potential guests. Carson wasn't looking to make enemies, noted his former producer. Just the opposite. He wanted every interview to go smoothly. When he disliked someone, it was because they had made it impossible not to. Carson's unique position as part gatekeeper, part confessor to the stars gave him an unparalleled perspective on celebrity culture. For 30 decades, stars revealed sides of themselves on his couch they showed nowhere else, creating a bond of trust that made Carson's private judgments all the more significant. Perhaps most revealing is how Carson distinguished between guests who were merely difficult and those he considered truly problematic. He tolerated eccentricity, nervousness, even moderate ego, understanding these came with the territory of fame. What he couldn't stand was cruelty, especially toward those with less power. Carson had a simple test, recalled his longtime director.
How did they treat the production assistants, the cameramen, the people working behind the scenes? That told him everything he needed to know about someone's character. In the years since Carson's death, many of Carson's private opinions have been validated by broader revelations about these celebrities. Various allegations and reports have corroborated what Carson observed firsthand, suggesting he wasn't just being judgmental, but was recognizing genuine character flaws that Hollywood's publicity machine worked overtime to conceal from the public. Today, one cell phone video could end a career, observed a former Tonight Show writer. Back then, someone could act terribly toward an assistant, and as long as they sold tickets, the story would never leave the building. As we look back on Hollywood's golden age with nostalgia, Carson's unvarnished assessments serve as a valuable reminder that our cultural icons have always been fallible, complicated human beings, sometimes inspiring, sometimes disappointing, and occasionally truly disturbing behind their carefully crafted public personas. Carson used to say the camera doesn't just add weight, it adds a layer of fiction, recalled his longtime producer. His greatest skill wasn't just interviewing people, it was seeing through that fiction to the truth underneath.